everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great. Well, it's still interesting weather we've been having.
Boy, this is a spring. We're getting everything this spring.
There's snow on the ground yet here in Fargo and for quite an area. And it was raining hard the other day, yesterday morning. Raining hard. It didn't make all the snow disappear. Today's chilly. So, yeah, but, it's still early.
Well, yeah, and exactly. We've gone from 50-degree days, and over the course of that, then we go to, about 32, but snowing 10 inches in Fargo here, and kind of throughout the area got a fair amount of snow. Not so much up in Grand Forks, but, other parts of the area, a lot. And then now we're getting, like you said, rain, and I think by the time this show airs, we'll be looking at 50, 60-degree days. So...
Exactly. And spring will come. It's interesting. Sometimes I wish that I could get out in my vegetable garden and do some tilling and things. But of course, much more important is that farmers need to get in their field. So we need to have some warm, dry conditions so that can all happen as well. But I'm anxious for a little more spring to come.
Yeah, it'll be nice. But if you want to look on for a bright side, this is moisture that the ground is going to get. Yes. And this helps because we did not get a lot of moisture this winter.
Can you imagine after the snow disappears, I think the grass underneath there is going to just burst.
Yeah, I think
it might be kind of interesting, too, when that snow actually finally disappears, the grass maybe is going to be green under there. I know the soil's still pretty chilly, but...
Boy, we may need to get going into mowing quicker than normal.
Right from the snowblower to the lawnmower.
Reposition in your garage as needed.
Yes.
Well, with it being spring, we thought that we would do some kind of spring cleaning of the mailbox here. And so we're just going to take some questions that readers have sent in, some letters that readers have submitted.
And it's always fascinating to see the variety of questions that come in because we're all in this together. And, we deal with so many different things in gardening, trees, shrubs, houseplants, horseradish.
Yep.
And so many things. So it's fun to talk about some of these letters and things that are on all our minds.
And what's great is that maybe this will inspire somebody to try something different that they haven't done, or at least get them thinking about, well, that's kind of interesting. I never really would have thought about that because I have not done it yet myself. So This is kind of a great way to expose some different ideas. So let's jump in. We've had a lot of talk about amaryllis lately, and Kay Hugtvet Kay wrote, "Hi Don, I caught your podcast a couple weeks ago with instructions on how to overwinter and continue growing an amaryllis. I have this one bulb that was my mother's, so it has to be almost 20 years old, and I don't want to be the one to kill it. I understand that.
Yes.
I have kept it alive so far, but haven't been able to get it to bloom since I've had it. So the information shared was really good, and I will follow that this year to see if I can get it to bloom next spring. The question I have is about the pot size. When I freshened the soil, the roots were growing to the edge of the 8-inch pot and then curling down towards the bottom. Should I move it to a bigger pot?" And Kay submitted a photo, which is really nice.
Yeah, thank you, Kay, for including the photo. And in the photo, I can see that it's in a pot that's big enough. Now, when I say big enough, amaryllis bulbs are huge.
Yeah.
And they only need about 1 inch on either side, on all sides, of the bulb between the bulb and the pot. And I can see there's plenty. There's more than 1 inch. So the pot size is plenty big enough. And as I'm looking at the photo, a generous amount of the bulb is still sticking out of soil, and that's the way it should be. Mm-hmm. When a person looks at from the top of the bulb down to the bottom of the bulb, about 1/3 should be extending out above the soil level because that's just the way amaryllis bulbs get planted. So, Kay, I think your pot is plenty big enough. And I have confidence you're going to get that to bloom. And a couple of keys. One is to, when weather moderates outside, move it outdoors, pot and all. It can be sunk pot and all into a flower bed and then watered, or you can keep it where you maybe have some of your other container flowers. So one key is outside; it'll get good light, maybe half day sun, half day shade. But then also fertilize. Fertilize it with a good water soluble type every 1 to 2 weeks. That nutrition is very important for building up that flower bud that in turn will give it the flower blossom that you're looking for.
Excellent. So great tip there. And like I said, we've had a lot of questions about amaryllis. It's been kind of a hot topic. And so
Kay will expect a report.
Yes,
we'll enjoy.
Thanks for sending in
keep us posted.
The process picture. Happy to see once they bloom this year. That'll be really nice. Speaking of soil, this is a question about garden soil testing. This is from Tobias Zickmund. I thought you may be able to direct me to resources to test my garden soil as I look to amend or prepare it for the coming year. I garden in North Fargo in a friend's backyard and am approaching my 5th year there. Is there a low-cost resource to see what I may benefit from? Thanks, Toby.
And a soil test is really, really important. You don't need to do a soil test every year, but especially a newer garden and every maybe so often, maybe that's every 5, 6, 8 years. It's a good idea to test that soil. What a soil test gives you, it will tell you the pH. If it's unusually, in our area, it's alkaline, most of them. And so if it's way alkaline, kind of out of the growing range, there's concerns there. But it'll probably show that it's alkaline, but still within a range. It tells how much organic matter is in there. So that's very important because we want soils that are, have a decent amount of organic matter. And then it will tell the nutrient content in that soil. So if it's low in certain nutrients, then that indicates, we're going to have to watch the fertilizer and things. So now NDSU does not have a soil testing lab anymore. So 2 options. One is the University of Minnesota Soil Testing Lab. So to access their site, you just simply do an online search, University of Minnesota Soil Testing Lab. It'll pop it up. It'll tell you how to take the sample and where to send it to. So you can just mail it in. It doesn't take a huge quantity. It's they're probably going to say a couple of cups or so of soil enclosed in a bag and mailed to them. Another option, North Dakota option, is the company called Agvise. Agvise, located in Northwood, North Dakota. They do soil testing for home gardeners. They also do field testing and things for agriculture use. So check out their site. Search online for Agvise, Northwood, North Dakota. That'll have all the details. Each of these, the cost is, I believe, around $20, $25 or so, and so quite reasonable. And that's always a good indicator of what your soil is, because I've heard the old saying, if you just fertilize your soil, it's kind of like adding salt to soup without first tasting it. So a soil test is excellent. Have you had your soil tested?
We haven't actually.
I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, we haven't. And that's
I've got an admission. Don't let this go any farther than any of us. Yeah, you and me and the podcast listeners. Okay, we moved to our spot 10 years ago. I was busy planting, getting the lawn established. I need to do a soil test, and so I'm going to do it this. I'm not sure which of the 2 I'll send it to, but I'm going to send a soil sample to one of those 2.
Okay.
So I need to put my money I need to put my soil test where my mouth is, I guess. And so I'm going to do that because, a person should do that. I am very curious what my own soil is going to test out at.
It's scary to think that your garden could become more prolific and more bountiful and beautiful than it already is, Don. I mean, if there's room, there's always room to improve. We always say that.
Maybe I'm salting that soup, and I wouldn't need to be salting that soup.
That's true.
Yes.
All right. Well, before we take our first break, since we're doing kind of a letter show, why don't you tell everybody if they have questions or if they have a question for you, what's the best way to reach you?
Send an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, at ndsu.edu.
All right, we'll take a quick little break. When we come back, more questions from listeners.
Local news affects your life. It gives you the confidence and clarity to make better decisions every day. You can support that with a digital subscription. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to take advantage of our introductory offer, just $6 for 6 months.
All right, we're back in this week. We're doing some kind of spring house cleaning. We're cleaning out the mailbox. And so we're getting around to answering some questions that we haven't been able to answer on the air that people have sent to Don. So this is one from Carol Moen. She writes, I start my marigolds from seed, do many of them as I use in the vegetable and flower gardens, both in Minot and in Roseau County, Minnesota, where our farm is located. I don't seem to know when to pinch them back, so I get bushy plants before putting them in the ground. What should my timing be? I don't like single stems with one flower at the top. Thank you for your advice. From Carol Moen.
Great. Well, thanks for asking that. I love this question, okay, because I love starting marigolds from seed. Right now in our basement on a heat mat and under lights, the geraniums seeds have sprouted. I start them in a tray. Okay, a tray with seeded. And then when they get about big enough to handle, which will probably be in a couple of days, then I transplant them out of the seed tray and into the individual cell packs. That transplanting gives a good start to them rather than direct seeding into the cell packs. So the way the greenhouses do it and the way the wheels did it and the way I do it in home under lights is you start them in a seed tray, individually transplant them out into the cell pack. Okay. So, and Carol maybe has done that. So then they grow in that cell pack. And at a certain point, you got a nice little plant. And, but sometimes it's just an individual little plant without a whole lot of breaks or, I love that term breaks. That's the expression for lots of side growth coming out of the main stem. And the more side shoots you get coming out the main stem, you're going to eventually have more flowers. But those little seedlings in the cell pack tend to want to have just one little straight shoot coming up. And sometimes in the cell pack, they'll develop a flower bud, which opens up. And, well, it's really pretty, but that's taking a lot of strength. And so, as Carol mentioned, if you pinch back these marigolds, you're going to get more breaks, more side growths, and so removing that flower. Now, my mom was great at this. She had learned that this was the key to annual flowers was you pinch them back before you transplant them out or even earlier. And I remember just being shocked. My gosh, you're removing that flower. Isn't that what we're all about here is to get this flower? Well, she knew. So as Carol mentioned, when should we pinch that out? So when I've got my marigolds still growing in the basement under lights, they've been transplanted, they're growing along. As soon as they send up a flower bud, I pinch that off with maybe a couple of the sets of leaves right below that flower bud. So you're kind of pinching out the central growing point of that. And then that starts the process of the side shoots. And then, then maybe another month will go on. We're looking at the middle of May. We're ready to transplant those marigolds out into the flower bed or your pots and planters. And at that point, they probably sent up lots more flower buds. And I love doing this because it's a little bit shocking, but it works so well. You take a pruning shears or scissors and you cut off all the flowers and flower buds and maybe a little bit of the stem again, because even though you've got a nice, healthy, sturdy little plant, it'll become even better with even more breaks. And so when you get ready to transplant out, cut off all the blossoms and buds and let that plant go in. So it'll be green for a little while, but the end result is so fantastic. So I do that with marigolds, petunias, zinnias, almost any annual plant except geraniums. The geraniums the greenhouses have done that for you. They've pinched off the initial blossoms. Our geraniums in the basement, under lights, I've been pinching those off. So those blossoms on geraniums in May, let them bloom. Okay. But everything else, I mow them off at the planting time.
All right. This is a question from Thomas DeWald. Hello, Mr. Kinsler. I have a row of juniper trees along my fence in my backyard. They are approximately 25 years old and have recently become overgrown by a creeping vine. When I first noticed the vines, I cut them back at the source as best as I could. That didn't seem to help and perhaps encourage their growth. It appears that they have killed off over half the trees. Is there anything that can be done to stop them?
Well, when he mentions creeping vines, okay, so obviously they're winter hardy because they're coming back. They're coming back to smother his evergreens, and so they've got to be fully winter hardy. They've got to be a root system that's wintering and not something just seed grown that's kind of sprouting up each spring. Okay, so that tells me it's one of two things: either a wild grapevine, or the other one that's more likely is Virginia creeper. Now, Virginia creeper, I believe, have you had that at the back of your lot?
In fact, the first couple of years, I noticed that, hey, that's growing up in my arborvitae tree. That shouldn't be.
Yes. Sometimes you'll see them growing up a telephone pole.
Yes.
And of course, they can't kill a telephone pole, but they can grow they can kill a living plant. Virginia creeper grows so tenaciously that it will wrap itself around, and they've got a fairly big kind of palmate leaf, and so the foliage can smother out the light from whatever it is growing on. They're capable of probably growing 20 feet in a season.
Yeah, they grow quite rapidly.
Each year they will leaf out from that above ground part. They don't have to die all the way back to the ground. So each spring they can start out very vigorously, and they can easily kill. On an evergreen, they would probably shade out whatever they're growing on. They'll shade it out, and an evergreen can quickly then just become devoid of foliage. So what does a person do with that? Okay, if you can trace the vines back down to soil level, and it's probably spread enough so that it's probably emerging from more spot than just one. But if you can trace it down to the point at which they're coming out of the ground, and then with either a lopper, they can get a fairly large size stem where they originate out of the ground. So it might take a lopper type shears to cut through there, or even a pruning knife or saw. Cut it off at ground level and have some herbicide ready. I just use a 2,4-D based herbicide. That's in things like Ortho Weed Be Gone. There are other brands of that too on the fine print on the label, 2,4-D. Okay, so what a person does is immediately when you cut that the vine off at the base, ground level, squirt some 2,4-D based herbicide on that cut surface and then mound it over with some soil. That the herbicide will go down into that cut surface, and then some soil over the top will prevent that from kind of evaporating or vaporizing. And that can be quite effective. And so wherever you find some of that coming out of the soil, if you can then cut and kill that area, and that should work quite effectively.
Where we have it coming up our arborvitaes, I've been able to kind of keep it at bay by trimming it back regularly. And every time I see it pop up, trim it back. But in another part of the yard where we have them, I try to train it so that it goes up our fence.
They can be beautiful.
Yeah. In the fall, they are really lovely.
Yeah. At our home where I was growing up in Lisbon, we had a wire fence, and we had Virginia creeper planted at the base of that. And it made a living wall, it made a solid fence, and we would trim it so that it would play nice, so that it would stay where we wanted it. Maybe once a year we would trim it, and it made a living wall on that. So in the right place, Virginia creeper can be absolutely beautiful. You can turn a chain link fence into a very beautiful structure.
But certainly if it's growing on your trees and damaging your trees, totally
then
understand getting rid of it.
Bad deal.
Yeah. Well, here we've got this is called House Plant Concern. That's the subject line. And this is from Jennifer Lean. I hope this picture goes through. I included a rice grain for size comparison. Also, they crunch when you crush them, and there's something white on the inside. Should I report these plants? So she sent along a it's a picture of a close-up.
Yeah, thank you for the photo. So I am looking at little round tannish beads, almost perfectly round, and I suppose they're little less than the diameter of a rice grain, kind of like, so relatively small. And so fascinating question. So all these little tan round beads, okay, and indicates that when you crush them, there's kind of a white powder inside. To me, these look like the fertilizer beads that were in the potting mix. A lot of the potting mixes that indicate that they feed, that they have the nutrition and feed plants for maybe six months or a year. The way that they do that is with a slow release fertilizer that's been added in. And that fertilizer is in the form of these little beads that slowly self-destruct and slowly release their nutrients in. And so the material that, when you crush it, the kind of white powder-like material is probably the fertilizer. And the round outer shell is kind of that slow release coat on that. So, but it's interesting, those little beads. So that is what that looks like to me, is the fertilizer beads.
So yeah, she shouldn't bring her plants back. She doesn't need to report this. Just
exactly.
Keep watering.
And many greenhouses, garden centers, or houseplant producers will add this into the mix in which they're growing the plants, so that when we get the plants home, there will be some nutrition in that mix to keep the plant going well. So we don't immediately have to start always fertilizing a new house plant. It's got something to go on.
All right. Well, here we've got a question about rabbits. This is from Tim Lydahl. And he said, we live in South Fargo. The rabbits chewed through my quote-unquote protection around our fern leaf buckthorn shrubs. The attached photo shows how they quote-unquote pruned it up as high as they could stand. The bushes are about 5 years old and stand at about 6 feet. Should I cut everything back to the height of the rabbits left, or do nothing and hope that the bottom prune damage area grows up to the managing tops? Thanks.
So fernleaf buckthorn, interesting plant. Fernleaf buckthorn grows in kind of an upright oval, and you can use those as kind of a screening. You know, if you can picture something that will get maybe 8-10 feet tall and be an oval, you plant a few of those next to each other, and you've got kind of a living screen. Okay, so that's what the photo that he showed. But the rabbits got in. And these were, I think, did he indicate about 5 feet tall?
Yeah.
The rabbits had cut, and there's multiple branches that come up kind of from the base. Well, the rabbits had gone in and sheared off about half of the branches that were coming on up. So I've got this uneven thing, 5 feet tall, but half of the branches are mowed down to like 2 feet or something. So I've got this big unevenness. So as he mentioned, should he just leave it and see if the ones that the rabbits cut down, will they catch up with the others, or what he should do? And I indicated I would, if this were mine, and I've had similar situations, I would prune the whole thing down at least to the level at which the rabbits ate it. So if that was 2 feet, then cut everything down to that level so that everything will regrow uniformly. But if they were a little bit woody, this could be a chance to rejuvenate those and cut them down to maybe 6 inches above ground level and let everything push back up nice and fresh again. Now, it's interesting. I did use this as a question in the Fielding Questions garden column that I do for Forum Communications, and it was in one of the Minnesota papers. And I got an interesting side email about this, okay? Now the term, the fernleaf buckthorn. And someone said, what about buckthorn? Should we even be planting these?
Oh, it's
because
invasive,
buckthorn, terribly invasive. Yeah. The common buckthorn is a bad weed that was introduced into this country in the 1800s as an ornamental shrub, and now it is one of the worst nuisance plants in forests, especially in Minnesota, the forested areas. The birds eat the berries, they drop them all over, they sprout. It takes nothing at all for them to sprout. They can take over other things. They become a large shrub, small tree, hard to get rid of. I battle them in our own yard because there's a kind of a shelter planting off to the west of us and the birds eat those berries, drop them on my property, and they're popping up all over. But the fernleaf buckthorn is not that species. Fernleaf buckthorn is a different species, and the cultivar of these that is in the nursery trade is called fine line buckthorn. Fine line buckthorn. It's produced by the Proven Winners brand of plants. You know, at a garden center, the Proven Winners brand of plants they're marketed in the white pots with the big PW on.
Yep.
Yes, they create great petunias and lots of wonderful things. Well, they also have a line of shrubs, and one of those is fine line fernleaf buckthorn. And I double-checked their site, and they indicate, too, it's non-invasive. We've had a fine line buckthorn for about 9 years. They don't produce seed. If they produce seed, their website says it's so minimal that it does not become invasive. So I've had one for 9 years, no problems at all. The leaves are finely cut, so it doesn't even look like a buckthorn. So I appreciated the one that wrote to me and said, what about this? What about this fernleaf? What about this fernleaf buckthorn? And so anyway, fine line, when you see that at the garden centers. Now, I believe there may be some states that have just blanketly said, we're not going to do that genus. It's the Rhamnus, regardless of cultivars. We're just not going to do anything with the buckthorn. But again, this one doesn't spread. But yeah, I appreciated that reader. What about these?
Yeah.
Yeah, they gave me a chance to kind of explain the difference in species between an invasive and a non-invasive.
Good to get a follow-up question like that.
I can't believe that was introduced onto our continent by well-meaning people.
The things that we learn in 150 years, yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Well, this is a question. The subject line is Weeping Willow White Growth. This is from Levi Jordheim. And he says, could you direct me to someone who could maybe interpret what is happening to the willow tree in my yard? It has white growth as of late last year, and I want to do whatever I can to remedy this. It's a very large tree, which provides a ton of shade. If you have any other resources for information on this, let me know if you would. Thank you. Levi.
A wonderful picture of a wonderful, just a classic old willow. Big stems, multiple stems coming from the ground level, a beautiful weeping branches on it. Just a classic, beautiful willow tree. And I could tell that there were some pruning cuts on it, from maybe branches that had to be kind of removed. And on some of the branches, especially where pruning cuts had been made, there was some white growth, and then also on the kind of where several trunks met, there was some kind of whitish growth, looked like a fungus. I'm going to get a second opinion too from our forestry specialist, but when kind of fungus starts growing on like branches or trunks, it's almost always secondary to something. Maybe there's a bit of rot happening on some bark. Maybe there's a pruning cut that didn't seal or kind of heal up solidly. So maybe there's a little bit of fungus going on that. So usually when we see something like that, it's secondary. For example, in a forest, when you see mushrooms, which are fungus, when you see those growing on the trunk of a tree, those mushrooms or fungi have come in because there's an opportunity. There's maybe a little moisture or something there on that tree trunk that they could get started on. And so with the willows grow quickly. They can grow to a very old age, but also a rule of nature is the faster that a tree grows, they aren't always as long-lived. And so now I'm hoping that Levi's willow is going to enjoy many more years. But sometimes when we start seeing fungi, mushrooms growing on a tree, we need to be a little cautious because it can indicate that there are other things going on. And we say other things, to be watchful that there isn't some rot happening. On a multiple trunk tree, a big old willow with lots of stems, big trunks all coming out, there's a lot of crevices. And those crevices are spots where moisture accumulates. That's where a little bit of rotting can start. So I haven't responded back yet to Levi with some additional information, but I'm going to, and kind of just indicate to him to watch. I would scrape off, just physically scrape off that white material that is growing, and to kind of keep an eye. There's not a treatment as such that he can probably do. I might suggest that he treat, because it certainly wouldn't hurt. I might suggest that he treat it with a systemic type fungicide. There's a relatively new one called Infuse, which is a systemic, meaning that it's kind of taken up by a tree. So I'll probably suggest that he investigate that to see if that's a good labeled use for that.
Well, he took a good first step in sending you an email and sending
Exactly.
an email to the extension department there. For people who have questions of their own, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, Kinzler, at ndsu.edu. I always like to add the Z in there because it's awfully easy to put an S in instead of the Z.
I've got a question for you. How many questions do you get in a week, let's say between May and September?
Per week?
Per week.
It's probably 200.
Okay.
It's not thousands every week, but it's enough that keeps me busy.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
It is.
All right. Well, let's take a quick little break, and when we come back, more questions.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back, and this week we're opening up the mailbag, taking some more questions from listeners. Of course, we do this every week, but we thought, okay, let's do a little spring cleaning and get some more out of the way here. So this is a question. It's, hi, Don. Not sure I have a question. Good news and bad news to share. I moved into a new house in Horace in September 2024. Spring 2025, I planted 2 trees, 3 boomerang lilacs, 2 chokecherry, lavender, and ornamental grasses. Well, that sounds great. She's off to a great start there.
Wonderful.
I also mulched lawn clippings late last summer. Great. That provided a nice winter habitat for the voles in my lawn. So not so great. And where the snow drifted around the lilacs and chokecherries, the voles ate up and down everything below the snow line. Landscaping fencing kept rabbits out, but was useless for voles. Attached a couple pictures. She doesn't think the lilacs and chokecherries will survive. I call it tuition payment, but disappointed because I thought I bought the right plants for the climate and area I live in. So any thoughts for her?
Oftentimes we think of vole damage as damaging the lawns, and that's probably the most visible because when the snow disappears, if you've had vole damage, you see all these runways, these meandering runways over the surface of your lawn, and they just make kind of a mess. The lawns recover. But in this case, the voles went after her shrubs and maybe a few small trees. So the interesting thing is that voles will absolutely do that. And when they do that with trees and shrubs, when they totally chew off all the bark down into the white wood at the lowest part, and that's where they're reaching, they don't leave any buds down there remaining. If a rabbit eats the top of lilacs, they're going to come back.
Right.
Okay. But when a vole eats all of the growing points that are low like that and down even into kind of almost the root area, there's nothing left to come back. So unfortunately, in the picture that she sent, I think they are dead. I think she judged it rightly. I don't think they're going to come back. So now, chicken wire does a good job for rabbits, and if it's high enough, does a good job for deer. But in many cases, hardware cloth, the little mesh welded wire hardware cloth with a very small, maybe 1/4 inch.
Yeah, very fine openings, very small.
Is what's needed to protect against voles. And because because voles can easily climb through chicken wire openings. So it's a good question. So when we want to protect something, should we be going to all hardware cloth? Luckily, vole damage on trees and shrubs isn't as widespread as lawns, but it's a roll of the dice. On most of my things, I protect them with chicken wire, but I have in the past had young aspen trees ruined with vole damage. And so if a person's had vole activity in one's yard, maybe hardware cloth is what many of us should be using instead of chicken wire.
And if that's the case, do you want to have it up around year-round or just in the winter?
In the winter.
Okay.
The voles attack those trees and shrubs. When they attack the lower part of trees and shrubs, it's under the cover of snow.
Okay.
And I've not known voles to do damage like that during the growing season. They're pretty skitterish about hiding because voles don't run very fast, and a predatory bird can easily swoop down and catch them. So most of their damage is under the cover of snow.
We talk about things like that burning bush is like you call it rabbit candy,
yes.
Candy for rabbits. Is there anything, do you think, that lilacs or chokeberries, are those things that would maybe be more draw or attract voles?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Lilacs, like dwarf Korean lilac, rabbits love those. And so I think probably that might be a case too. So it might mean looking at some of the shrubs like that might be more attractive and trying to shield those especially.
Yeah, she said she did a good job of researching to see what was good for our area, and then along come a vole. So.
Exactly.
Okay, well, as we're getting into spring, people are going to be wondering about their lawn. So we've got a question about lawn. Hi, Don. I'm wondering if you have a brand or type of pre-emergent herbicide for quack/crabgrass this spring. And my memory is that it should be applied before April 15th. Thanks. This is from Andy Vidston.
Well, the first thing is to determine whether this wide-bladed weedy grass that you're trying to prevent or deal with is quackgrass or crabgrass, because they're two totally different things. So crabgrass preventer is meant to put on by the time the soil has warmed to about 50 degrees. So typically it's April 15th. This year, that's not going to happen. So as soon as snow disappears, monitor soil temperature. And when it starts getting up into the upper 40s, we need to have crabgrass preventer on hand. Now, that's gotten from hardware stores, chain stores, garden centers. It's a granular product. There are some liquids that you put on, and it kills the crabgrass seeds as they're sprouting. Okay, so that's crabgrass. Crabgrass is an annual that grows from seed. Quackgrass, on the other hand, is a winter-hardy perennial root system that comes back every year from that. Crabgrass preventer does nothing to prevent quackgrass. One easy way to tell is if it's starting to green up early in the season, it's quackgrass. My quackgrass is already starting to turn green because it's got that well-established winter hardy root system. So as soon as your lawn grass is thinking about greening up, the quackgrass is right there as well. And then also digging down to see. Quackgrass has the pearly, whitish, tannish runners underground. So again, if you're seeing it early in the season, it's probably the quackgrass, and the crabgrass preventer won't handle that. Crabgrass oftentimes comes up along our sidewalks and driveways where maybe the heat has diminished the grass a little bit, or maybe you scraped it with the snow blower, and that little empty pocket or thinner area of lawn grass is the spots where crabgrass seed can start to sprout. So those are especially the areas to target with the crabgrass preventer. Crabgrass itself has a hard time getting established in a good, thick stand of turf because it has to sprout its seed. And if there's no room for that seed to sprout, it is less problematic.
All right. Well, got one last question here. This is from Carolyn Van Mackelberg says, "Hi, Don. I'm a gardener in Grand Forks. I am planning to plant a tree on the west side of my house. I live a mile south of Grand Forks, so not in city limits. The area I am looking at has walls on the north and east sides. It is direct exposure to the west with no shelter and minimal shelter from the south. It tends to be a dry spot unless watered. Due to the size, I am looking at a Japanese tree lilac or a spring flowering snow crab. I will be planting these from bare root. My questions are, which tree will be most adaptable to that location? What will likely flourish and grow faster? I am unlikely to live forever, and I want to see it as a tree and not a sapling. And are there any recommendations you would suggest? We had a honey locust there, but it totally overgrew and overwhelmed the space, so size is a concern. I would appreciate any insight or suggestions you may have. Thank you so much, and happy spring."
Thank you for writing. Japanese tree lilac. That checks all the boxes that you wanted to check. The lilacs as a species don't like wet feet, so as she indicates, it's a little drier site. Japanese tree lilac will love that. Garden centers have some very beautiful cultivars of Japanese tree lilac. When we think of lilac, we think of a shrub, a branchy shrub. Japanese tree lilac is a tree, usually single-stemmed tree. It can get up to 25 feet tall or so in height, 20, 25 feet. And so it will fit the spot. It doesn't become overly wide, so it'll stay put very well. Develops big, beautiful, poofy white, poofy, I think that's a botanical term.
That's a scientific very.
And, in June, later than our shrub-type lilacs, beautiful white blossoms in June. And I think that's going to be very pretty for it. It has a decent rate of growth. And so Japanese tree lilac, you'll find a couple of different varieties named cultivars of that at garden centers, and they're all good.
All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun going over some questions from listeners, just kind of in mass here. This has really been great. So if people have questions for you one last time, what's the best way to reach you?
Send an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, @ndsu.edu.
And if they have pictures, they should send pictures.
Oh, that's always great. For diagnosis, or if you're sharing something really successful,
right.
We'd like to see the photos as well.
Yeah, I know in the Midwest we may be a little humble and not like to brag, but please, when it's your garden, you've deserved it. Yeah, let's share our successes. So send those along to Don. And Don, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, John, and thanks everyone for listening.